I'm standing outside the house where Walt Disney was born. The city of Chicago has declared it a landmark. Disney is someone of great importance to me. It was actually partially because of Disney that I moved to Chicago in the first place. I had read in one of the biographies that Disney had studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I had the good fortune of being offered a scholarship, and I packed up my bags and left Arizona and headed straight for Chicago. I'm Brandon Kosters, and in this series, we'll explore the art of animation. You're probably wondering where to begin. In terms of books, I have a few resources that I recommend highly. The first one is a book called Cartoon Animation by an author named Preston Blair. Preston Blair animated with a lot of the big studios, including Disney and MGM, during what a lot of people refer to as the golden age of animation, the 1930s and 1940s. The Preston Blair book is really useful for giving you information about the design formulas and the principles of design that informed cartoons for decades and decades. Another book that I highly recommend is called The Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams. Richard Williams is also the gentleman who directed the animated segments of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The Richard Williams book is more useful when it comes to getting a firm grasp of timing and spacing. In this series, we're going to discuss the mechanics of animation. We're going to discuss the fundamental principles behind character design, and we're going to get into the principles of timing and spacing. Some of the exercises we do will be based around tangible material, pencils and paper, I mean. And some of the exercises I do will be based around digital media. And some of the exercises I do will be about the synthesis of those two worlds. And here we have my praxinoscope. The praxinoscope was invented by Charles-Émile Renaud in France in 1877. It's the successor to the zoetrope, which had become commercially available 31 years earlier. Now, you'll notice that the speed at which the animation moves is contingent partially on the speed at which you rotate the object, right? So I wanted to start here because cinematic animation. It's basically the same principle. To understand how cartoons work, we need to understand a concept known as persistence of vision. Now, the main idea with persistence of vision is that when we see a sequence of images closely related, shown in rapid succession, what you ultimately perceive is one continuous stream of images, something fluid, something moving. Now, the praxinoscope actually illustrates this phenomenon, persistence of vision, pretty well. Take a look at this strip. Each one of these images is almost like a cell in an animated cartoon. For our first exercise, we're going to make flip books. Now, you can order some that are pre-made, or you can fashion them yourself using index cards and binder clips. You can be fairly loose. It's hard to be precise with these just because it can be hard to see through to the page underneath, which is really critical with animating intricate details. Let's get into Photoshop. Okay, we're going to create a new image file. Now, true high definition video is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, okay? So what I like to do is I like to create image files at that native resolution. That way, if I import image files into the timeline that are the same resolution, you see what I'm saying? Nothing's going to look grainy, nothing's going to look warped. Everything should be copaesthetic, okay? And I'm saving it at 300 pixels per inch, okay? That's what PPI stands for. Pixels per inch, so 300 PPI, or you might see it on some interfaces as DPI, dots per inch. DPI is probably less commonly used now that print media is becoming largely obsolete. The idea, I believe, with 300 PPI is that you could print the image at 100% its resolution without loss at 300 PPI. 600 PPI would allow you to print an image at least 200% its native size. We don't really need that. We're making everything specifically for the video timeline. So 300 DPI or PPI is fine for our purposes. Another reason that I would prefer 300 to 600 is that the file sizes are going to be smaller, and this becomes really significant. This becomes really critical when we're animating, if only because of the sheer insanity of the file sizes. Oh, okay. All right. Default layer, okay? It's going to be just an opaque white layer. I'm going to bring the opacity down to 0, and I'm going to write transparent, okay? And this is very important, and I'll explain why more here in a moment. So for our first exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to make a ball bounce. Okay? Now the beautiful thing about Photoshop is that it lets us work in layers. Okay. So you see here, this is the transparent layer. This is my layer 1. What are we going to put? We can put layout drawing. Okay. And just, name your files as much as it makes sense for the purpose of keeping things organized. Organization is really critical because you're going to inevitably be dealing with various pieces. The tighter your organization, the more streamlined and painless this process should be for you. Now with the layout drawing, we're just trying to map out the arc of motion and just get a sense of where everything's going to fall into place. Okay? So let's draw, we'll call that drawing 1. Okay. And then let's say right here is where the ball is going to make contact with the ground. Okay. We don't know the number yet. I'll have to think about that a moment. But after it makes contact with the ground, it's going to squash. Okay. We're going to talk about squash here in a minute. And then it's going to shoot back upwards. Okay. Shoot back upwards. Then it'll go down again, and maybe we'll do a couple bounces, and then maybe for fun's sake, we'll have it bounce off the screen. Okay. Now what these drawings are doing is it's just mapping out the trajectory, okay? It's mapping out how everything's going to move. Okay, so let's bring the opacity down on this layer a little bit. And you know what, actually, another thing that I like to do. Let's turn off the drawing a minute. Let's give it a background color. Something that we can get rid of as we need to. And I'll explain why we would want to get rid of the backgrounds in a little bit. But for the purpose of drawing, it's sort of useful to have something in the background. Something sort of innocuous and warm. We'll do sort of like a weird beigey yellow. Okay, so I'm going to draw in a shade of blue just to differentiate it from this layout drawing. Okay, so this is just going to be secondary layout, and we're just trying to map out the motion. So where we have drawings closer together, it's going to be more fluid and slow. Where they're further apart, it's going to be jerkier and faster. Okay. So at what point, so it becomes a question of at what point in this cycle is the ball going to be moving the fastest? Let's try to chart this out. These are all the little spots that we're going to hit along the way. Okay, so stretch and squash. So the ball hits the ground, it compresses, then it's going to shoot upwards, and as it shoots upwards, it's going to stretch. Thus, stretch and squash. Okay, and after a little stretch, it's going to resume usual shape. Okay. Ease up into this position. And then it's going to plummet back down. And then we're going to pop back up. Okay? And we want to, I'm being very loose here because these are drawings that I'm going to draw over. I'm just trying to chart out what the trajectory is, what the overall movement is. Obviously, we want to try to keep our shapes uniform in size. You can see how this is very subtly larger than this one, and the problem that that would create if we left it that way without the problem if we didn't correct that would be that it would just sort of morph and look sort of gooey and squish around. Chris Sullivan, who was a teacher at SAIC, he had this expression that I thought was great. Teddy bear epidermis he had for when things are just sort of squishing around unnaturally because there isn't adequate consistency with the drawings. Okay, so here we have layout drawing 2. So we'll call this layout 1, and we'll call this one layout 2. All right, so now that we have these two layout layers, what we can do is we can group them together and put them in the same folder. Okay, and we'll call this layout. Why do that? Because inevitably we're going to have a bunch of files, and the more we can do to keep things organized, the better. And the other advantage is, see, we've got 2 files here. If I don't want to look at these individual files, I can just close the folder. And look at how nice and neat that is. The other thing is, it means that I can make global changes to these layers by just affecting the folder because they're all grouped together. I can do something here and affect all of these collectively is what I mean to say. So if I have this folder selected, the opacity is currently set to 100%. Well, opacity, what do I mean? If something's opaque, that means we can't see through it. Okay, transparent is sort of like the opposite of opaque. So as we reduce opacity, what we're doing in effect is increasing transparency. In other words, 100% opacity, I can't see through it. 50% transparency, 50% opacity, well, is the same as 50% transparency. It means I could see through quite a bit. 0% opacity would mean we could see right through it. Does that make sense? So because we want to reference these drawings, but we want to be able to differentiate these drawings from what we're drawing in individual cells, let's bring the opacity down. Cells. That's an interesting word. C-E-L-S. Okay, not entirely like skin cells or hair cells, but conceptually sort of the same. The reason, okay, behind the nomenclature though, the reason we call them cells is because they were originally on celluloid and later commonly acetate. Okay, so that's what we mean when we say cells, even though I'm not physically really using that medium. And I will talk about that physical medium a little more in depth in a later episode. What's crucial to understand now is that when I say cell, what I'm talking about is an individual image from an animated sequence. Okay, so now that we've brought the opacity down on our layout drawings, let's create a new folder for our cells. Okay, we're going to name this folder cells, and we're just going to fill Make sure they're all in here. Yeah. We're just going to fill this folder with images. And let's say right now, just for the sake of this exercise, that we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 drawings. So let's do 18 layers. Because we have a distinctive folder, I'm not going to worry about naming these individual layers right now, but that is something to be mindful of as you're constructing your animation. Okay, so layer 1. Let's first of all use a different color to differentiate it. So we used blue in the layout. Let's use red here for this top layer. Okay, so here we'll call this our first image. Okay, and we put this on layer 1. Okay, let's go to layer 2. So each drawing gets its own distinct layer. This is very, very important. Make sure you're on the right layer when you're doing a given drawing, and you can turn them on and off as you need, just to make sure. Layer 3. Again, trying to keep shapes uniform in volume and size. Okay, we'll get this to move down here. Good idea to have your history window open, because as you see, I just made a mistake, but I can backtrack it. I'm glad I caught it. What a hypocrite. I was just telling you to watch out for this very mistake. Okay, let me just make sure we're all good here. If you do notice that you've put something on the wrong layer, there are a number of simple mistakes that can be easily remedied. What I've done here is I've taken the magic lasso, I've drawn a circle around the circle that I want to isolate. I'm going to copy it out of layer 3, delete, okay, and then I'm going to select layer 4. I'm going to hold down Shift, Command, and V, and voila. Everything is still in its own independent layer. Okay, mistake remedied. Let's move on to our 5th circle. Okay. So 6, this is where it's going to make contact, sort of touching. Okay, 7, where we're going to squish. Okay. Like if you think in a cartoon when someone sort of smacks their face because something utterly ridiculous has happened and their face sort of compresses. I mean, it's the same basic principle. 8. We're going to shoot up here. Okay. 9. And again, the layout drawing, the proportions are imperfect. I'm moving very quick here. Just try to keep everything uniform. Okay, 11. Oh. 13. Okay. Now I'm going to repeat. The ones that I used going up, I'm going to repeat for the bounce. Okay. 14. Okay, let's go 15. 16. 17. 18. Oh, well, let's just make one more for 19. Okay, now here's the really fun part. Okay, so I already have this window open, but let's pretend I don't have the animation window open. In Photoshop, you're going to want to go to Windows. Make sure that the timeline window is open, okay? Click Create Video Timeline down at the bottom. Click this little thing here, okay? Change the timing. I like to keep it at 0.1 or 0.2 seconds just for referencing. And I like to make sure that it's set to loop forever. You could set it to loop once, 3 times, forever, or customize it. I like to just leave it at forever. Okay, right now there's not an animation because everything's happening on the same, everything's happening at the same time. We don't have things differentiated on the timeline yet. So we have 19 images of motion. I'm saying that I'm going to want a blank image bookending this sequence at the beginning and the end, okay? So in total, let's say we want 20 frames. All right. We're going to uncheck each one of these individual drawings. Okay. And I'm going to leave the layout there just for reference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you can see they're referenced. You can see the numbers listed here at the bottom of the screen. 20 images total. Okay, 0, we don't want anything. And remember, anything that you have on the first frame in the timeline is going to automatically be everywhere on the screen. So something to be cautious about. Okay, so on the second frame, that's when I want my first cell. Okay, there I want that cell. Fourth frame of the animation is the third cell from our sequence, right? And so on. So it's offset by 1. The fifth frame will have the fourth layer of our animation, and so forth. So let me just link all these up. Oh, I screwed up here. Okay. Okay. And then 6, 7, 8. See, I made a mistake, but I caught it. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so now we want it to bounce. And we want, let's have it hover in space just for a second. Okay, and then it's going to begin its descent downwards. So 12, we're repeating layer 13, we're repeating image 13 so that that image is held on screen a tiny bit longer. Now we're reversing this. 11, so we're just moving downwards. Everything's nice and linear. 10, 9, 8. Oh, we need more frames. Okay, and now at the very tail end of this, we want to make it sort of bounce off screen. 14, 15, and we're going to duplicate, get rid of 15, and put 16. Okay, duplicate, 7, duplicate, 18, duplicate, 19, duplicate, and we're going to turn it off. Okay, so then let's look at what this looks like when we play it in a loop. Boom. And it goes back down, and it jumps off. Okay, so that's what it looks like at this speed.